man thought for a moment and then laughed and said, "Don't you realize that there are miles and miles of beach and hundreds of starfish? You can't make any difference." So the little boy had been listening to him politely, and he bent down and picked up another starfish and threw it into the surf. Then smiling to the man, he said, "I made a difference to that one." And I think all of us, we've got to go through our lives thinking, I've made a difference. And that to me gives me a lot of consolation and happiness to think there have been people who I've been able to help. Now, another skill we have to learn from our parents. Now, we have to be tolerant. Now, accept other people for what they are. Now, I've got a large family, and about 12 years ago, I went to a very prestigious museum in south of London with my eldest granddaughter. She was about 7 at the time, school holidays, and the museum had laid on many cultural events for visitors, and we were standing on a balcony looking down, and there was an Indian lady there in a beautiful sari, and she was teaching a large circle of young school children about some dance music, dancing to Indian music. It was like the United Nations, with children whose parents had come from the four corners of the world. There was a small number of special educational needs children, disabled children. So the point here is, if they were all enjoying themselves, tolerance is bigger than race, religion, riches, or poverty. We've got to embrace everybody in all of our actions. We've got to be acknowledged people. At times now, we've got very, very lazy in our relationships with business colleagues, friends, and things like that. Acknowledgement. Now, if we acknowledge other people, then we stand out from the crowd. One of the things that I've noticed in my charity work and things like that, sending loads and loads of emails, which I have to do, is that a thank you, as you start an email, thank you for your message, thank you for your help. It goes a long, long way and makes us stand out from a very large crowd. Now, my parents, old school in the way they thought, and to them, it was politeness was another skill to learn from them. Remembering to say please or thank you. It's a greeting when you meet a senior executive in the company and they organise a cup of tea or coffee while you wait for your meeting. It is good to say thank you, either to the person who brought the coffee or tea to you, or to the executive who's organised for it. It makes you stand out. You are different. Now, many of you must buy things, buy yourself a new phone, buy yourself some new equipment, and they always come with loads of information, instructions. Yesterday, I bought myself a garden chair, and the instructions, periodically it would say in the instructions, please do not move to this part of the instructions before you've started and finished the beginning. So read the instructions. Now, in my last job, I got on very well with my boss, who was managing director, and it was a multinational company based in London. And he always used to ask me to sit in on interviews with potential new staff. Now, I suppose the main reason was for him to get a different perspective, different feedback, different opinion. But the other reason was to help him get rid of interviewees who had not read their instructions. Each person was given a task to make a 10-minute presentation on the subject of their choice. My boss would sit there for 15 minutes, listening, writing notes, and then his phone would ring. His secretary would then summon him, saying that he had an important phone call. He would make his apologies and go, leaving me to finish the unsuccessful interview. So when you go for an interview and you are invited to make a presentation, make sure that if it is that you've got 10 minutes, it lasts 10 minutes. Time is important. So reading the instructions for joining, to come for an interview, follow them closely. So where should you start now? You're coming to your time leaving school, joining the big world. Where do you start? Well, you've got to think long and hard about what's happening in the marketplace. Do you choose the skills that are needed today, or you build a strong knowledge, skill foundation that help you to cope with, adapt for future employment trends? Now, sit down and think. Look at the phones in your hands. Some of you are probably watching this on their phone. Did we think that the world would be like this 25 years, 30 years ago? Consumer electronics has moved a huge distance. The changes, the adaptations, the inventions. When I was 14, a long time back, I had a transistor radio, which weighed probably half a kilo. It was huge, but that was a portable transistor radio. So you've got to think, what is going to happen? Now, where do you start? Well, being a financial advisor, I always used to explain to my potential clients that life and financial planning were journeys and have to be treated as such. I used to ask them to consider 4 very simple questions. Now, for you, think about it. Where am I now? Well, in simple terms, you're a student just probably finishing high school. Where do I want to be? This is my journey. What sort of life do I want to lead? Perhaps, let's take the example, I want to be an optician with my own business. That's a good profession. Now, the next part of our journey is, how do I get there? As we started talking about different university courses, different places to go, how do I get there? What are the best courses, the best colleges? Are they local? And finally, am I there yet? Now, that is a question we should be asking ourselves all along. Am I there yet? If I'm not there, why not? Now, to put this in the business scenario, you've probably heard of this common phrase, a SWOT analysis, SWOT. A good time is to reflect on your own skills. What strengths do I have? What am I good at? Will that give me a guidance, an insight into what I want to do in the future? What are my weaknesses? Is there a subject which is vital to me? Perhaps mathematics. What do I need to improve? How do I do it? Now, opportunities, the O from the SWOT. Will there be many job opportunities, and will there be a long-term future? We don't know. And our opportunities, after we've looked at those opportunities, we have to think what threat which perhaps will prevent us from achieving this. The marketplace is full of people with the same ambitions. I've read on the Indian newspapers, which I read online, that sadly there are many graduates who are all out there looking for work. So you've got to work smarter than a lot of people out there. So we need to know, as we say here in the UK, what makes us tick? And then we need to plan the next step. We need a goal. You've probably heard that in business development courses. You imagine playing football without a goal at each end. Yeah, it sounds rather stupid, but there will be at least 23 people running around the sports ground aimlessly like headless chickens if there wasn't a goal in sight. Now, that applies equally to us then in our lives. So, some of you, again, perhaps in class or perhaps reading business books, you've heard of the acronym SMART. Teachers, hopefully, will think about this. It's an acronym for setting goals and targets. It's your revision. It's your social life. It's your work life. So what does the S stands for? Specific. What is your goal? Yeah. What might be a short-term goal? It might be a long-term goal. It's very difficult to say. When I left school, I thought, well, yeah, I'm going to do science. I've got the science exams. I'm going to be a scientist. That lasted 2 years. So our goal must be specific. It's got to be measurable. And that could be measured in different ways. Happiness, income, number of branches, number of employees. But it's got to be measurable. Something you could say whether you've achieved it or not. So is it achievable? What's the time frame? What do you want to do perhaps for the next 5 years? Can you do it in that 5-year period of time? One other thing also, when you're planning and making decisions, you've got to think, is it realistic for me? Have I looked at all the various points, various things to consider? And so many things now are becoming more realistic than before. Just think of the Paralympics, where perhaps 20 years ago, someone who lost a leg in a motorcycling accident had very little future as a sports person. Now, with those artificial limbs, they're sprinters, jumpers, fantastic opportunities there are. So, yeah, we have to take things into account. And then finally, time bound. We do not organise and use our time effectively. So it's always worthwhile to say, I will finish my degree, I will finish this, I will set up my business by, and then you can start planning. Now, okay, that's the start of our journey, but where will it take us? Now, one thing to consider is that there'll always be a skill in demand. Leadership. Every business, profession, vocation, even the armed services is looking for flexible, educated, intelligent leaders. But we don't start out as leaders. Yeah, but we can grow into the role of a leader for the future. And also we have to remember that not all great leaders lead from the front. So how do we move things forward? Well, I've got some ideas of what team leadership is all about. There are the team management skills of, like our meeting this morning, organising meeting. Thank you, Sanjay, for leading me into the talk this morning and introducing me. It's an important skill. Managing risk. If you're going to be running a business, you're going to need a team. There are risks involved. Overseeing projects and ensuring goals are met. That keeps cropping up everywhere in our future. And then finally, budget planning. We all need to budget. If we've got a business, we've got to run a budget. If we're a single person, we've just left university, we've got to run a budget. Can I afford to buy the motor scooter which I need to go to work on? It's very, very important. Now, there are other team leadership skills of organising the team to carry out action plans. Because if you are at the top, the apex of the business, then you can't do all the work. So you've got to organise teams. But if you have a team, even like in the sports team, you've got to motivate that team, keep them going in the right direction. And one of the greatest things I think you'll realise as well as students, that celebrating success and learning foundation from failures is an important thing. Somebody comes along, dusts you down, yeah, and you learn something from it. And then also succession planning. Who is going to be doing, as we grow, the next jobs? Now, from team leadership, it goes back, it's a life skill, it's an employment skill, and we need to consider communication. How do we do it? As I said earlier on, politeness, respect is an important part. Negotiation skills. We all need to know what is the best way to negotiate a solution, to help others make decisions. We need diplomacy. You may be sitting in on a large, long-winded committee meeting. How do you bring that meeting to a close diplomatically without offending people? And then finally, people skills. They're everywhere. There's no way you can go without bumping into people. So we need those skills as well. And I was talking about politeness. The best way to make friends with someone is to listen to them, not to talk to them. Yeah? Hear what they say, not what you've got to say. Now, what else do we have to learn? Well, it's awareness. Are you aware of what's happening around you? Is there a queue in a particular business sector? Keep an eye open for business opportunities. You need to network with other people, other professionals in your speciality. You imagine if you become the optician with a series of shops. It is good talking with other people to see what is going on. Now, involve as many people as you can, and you need some spares. People in that line, if you're building up to your business, to your career, people who can take over as and when necessary. And you've got to keep looking to the future. There's no point looking to the past. If I look at my past, sometimes I see just the dismal failures perhaps I've had, but always look to the future, to plan the future. And so these team leadership skills, be aware that they also apply to our everyday lives. So you need to plan your future. Thinking outside of the box, you've heard that one somewhere before. Look at it as an investment in your future. What are your goals? Aspirations for a family? All good issues, and these must be considered carefully. Now, the last time I was in India, I remember reading the newspapers there. Now, consider the fulfilling life of the retired space scientist. Now, forgive me if I don't pronounce this. BP Dakshiani, she has had, yeah? And as a young woman in the space industry, she had a hard future ahead of her. It was a man's world, but she has succeeded. So formal teaching, formal learning can teach you a great deal, but many of the essential skills in life are the ones you have to develop on your own. So to conclude, we need to ask ourselves two questions. Firstly, am I happy with what I'm doing? And secondly, am I going to work to live or live to work? Yeah, consider that. And then finally, to end my short talk, I have pinched somebody. It's from Anthony Robbins, and he says, There is a powerful driving force inside every human being that, once unleashed, can make any vision, dream, or desire a reality. So thanks ever so much for listening. You can relax a little now. And before I sort of move on to a list of questions, is there anything from perhaps Sanjay, is there anything you'd like to, from what I've just said, like to ask or to add? Lost him. Right. Is there anything, Sanjay, that you could add?
Well, sir, I mean, all the information you've given us is very like informational, I'd say. You know, it's very useful to all of us. We can use it in the future.
Right. Well, the leader of today's session, I have been given a list of 14 questions about my talk today, and I will concentrate. I got 3 first of all, and they are absolutely fantastic, all enveloping questions. So I shall read out the first question which I had, and at first when I read it I was a little flummoxed. Justice delayed is justice denied. Is it due to a failure in decision making? Now, everybody, you ask a politician a question and they will say to you, this is a very good question. But I would say it is a very good question, and it would provide actually an interesting subject for a student debate in society. So why do people say that justice delayed is justice denied? Well, there was a famous Prime Minister of England a good 100 years or so back, William Edward Gladstone, and he actually coined that phrase way back then. And it meant at that time that if justice is not carried out at the right time, then even if it is carried out later, it is not real justice, because when there was a demand for justice, there was a lack of justice. So my answer to this question, I would say it's hard, but it could normally be symptomatic of procedural failure, not following the prescribed rules. Sometimes the delay can be political, social, or perhaps the litigation is time-bound. And another issue here could be that the person actually is not taking the responsibility for resolving the matter. And so I see the headlines in the Indian newspapers, and there is a whole raft of issues which can cause this. I suppose in my mind personally, I'd be happy that true justice is actually carried out, even if it is carried out late. But there again, I'm not the person who needs that justice. So hopefully that has answered it, but I would say you need a debate in society, 10 on one side, 10 on the other, to actually discuss that one in great depth. Now, I've done my Shakespeare at school. My second question is to do a little bit with Shakespeare. My last year at school, we did Twelfth Night from Shakespeare, and I must say that even as an Englishman, I found the language incredibly difficult. So for you trying to study it, Shakespeare's work must be pretty unintelligible. But the question somebody has asked, and somebody has done their homework on this, is about Hamlet. Hamlet's delay syndrome, to be or not to be. Sometimes this is useful. Do I agree or not? Well, My answer to that question would be yes and no, because we all find ourselves in that situation. But the subject matter that concerns us here is procrastination, and that is a big issue. So what does this mean? Well, it's the practice of carrying out less urgent tasks in preference to more urgent ones, or doing the pleasurable tasks in the place of less pleasurable ones. So that's a hell of a mouthful. You can Google it, which I did, and I found many people who put articles on the internet there about Hamlet's comment. But to make this simple, to remove the mouthful about procrastination, it simplifies itself for Hamlet. Shall I make a cup of coffee, or shall I avenge the death of my father? Well, yeah, that's procrastination. So going back to my yes and no, we would have two scenarios. A relaxing cup of coffee and the time to think of an appropriate action, which is sort of Hamlet's reflective side. Or does he go out, doesn't think about it, in a rage, goes out and kills his father's murderer, and then has to suffer the unthought of consequences? So to procrastinate is normal. It really is, and we do it quite frequently. But it becomes problematic when it stops our normal functioning. Procrastination may result in stress, anxiety, health problems, and a severe loss of personal productivity. Now, this ties back into our talk today about decision making and life skills. So if a person suddenly begins to realize that they are procrastinating, then the solution is setting simple goals and achieving them. Remember the acronym SMART. The A, achievable, and T, time-bound, are the two to focus on at first. And then gradually, as we successfully achieve those small goals, we can gradually raise the bar. So that's really to do that. And it happens to us a lot. Do we put off that difficult essay? Do we put off that job searching decision? We've got to think about it. And if it becomes too much of a problem, go back to basics and start again. Now, at your time in your life, thinking now about your careers, I go back to my time at school, and I found it very difficult. I had not a clue what I wanted to do. I don't think ambition came into it. What was I going to do for the rest of my life never came into it. And I thought, well, I've passed my science. I got biology, physics, chemistry. I even got pure maths. So I thought, I know, I'll be a scientist. But is that the right decision? And the question, one of the questions here, the third question which I was asked, and I shall read it to you. Students are at a crossroads and in a dilemma. Many a time, parents force them to take up a course against their wishes. Some can't take or make, I say, the right decision. And then the person who wrote the question goes on, how can you help such children? Well, guys and girls, you are young adults and you have to think like one. So I agree with you. It is an important decision to make. As I said at the beginning of my talk, making a wrong decision is not the end. All it is the beginning of a different route and future. I was on a postgraduate training course, probably 20 years back now, and it was helping unemployed graduates find work. Yeah, we turn out in this country, as in India and at other places around the world, fantastically qualified graduates. But then you've got to find work. And in the group that I was in, there's probably about 25 of us. And there was a young woman in the group. She had a degree in her favourite subject, archaeology. I find that an interesting subject, but we were in the industrial northeast of England, near Newcastle. And to be honest, even now, there's not much of a need or demand for archaeologists. So how did she find work? Well, during the course that we was on, she did a SWOT analysis on herself. Sat down, I can imagine her spending a couple of weekends work. We were together for 3 whole months. And if you think what you might have read, watched programs on television, a lot of an archaeologist's work is recording, organising, liaising with other groups, other people. So she started, after she established what her skills were, she then looked for other work. And finally, she got a job recruited in a major teaching hospital in Newcastle in their training department. She found that all of the skills that a good archaeologist have were relevant. So maintaining course and delegate records, disseminating information, checking legislation, meeting other people who could help are all relevant parts of her training. So her university degree wasn't wasted, but it was a step in the direction of getting work. So I need to say a little bit about my personal experience. So I left school, started doing research and testing on rare metals, molybdenum, tungsten, and such like. Very boring, small laboratory, and the factory where I worked doesn't exist anymore. But in the different jobs that I sort of took over time, I was able to help my sort of colleagues. I don't know how I gained that skill, but I helped them to do their job more successfully. One job I had where the manager of the branch of the insurance company I was working gave me a member of staff to be responsible for, because it's a choice, them learning how to do their job better or losing their job. And I worked with them, found out their skills, the key to what made them tick, and then helped them utilize those skills. So I gradually moved through jobs, through life, and ended up in the financial services industry, the life insurance world, which I see on the billboards in India. I have a colleague in Wycombe who works for LIC. And I moved into that industry in the training and development department and worked there for 10 years, working both here in the UK. When I first started with my last job, I covered the whole of the UK from Aberdeen in the north east of England, northwest. The only part we didn't have branches was the southwest. I used to travel 1,000 miles a week driving to work with people. I went to work in America with them on computer programs, customer service, etc. In that time, I passed my examination, so I am actually a qualified stockbroker and qualified financial advisor. A big difference for the type of job that I had when I first left school. The income that I earned was massive, but it was the end of a journey. For me, I think I can definitely say a successful journey, but it was very traumatic en route at times. Now, I'm carefully looking at the clock here, and I do have 11 other questions on my list. But I would say, and thank you for the people who did write those questions and forward them to me. I hope that I've covered them in what we've been talking about. But if we have a few minutes spare, I'm open to questions. If anybody has a question, one of the leaders, anything, I'm pleased to try and answer. Thank you.